think that's based at the College of Social Sciences and Philosophy. And that would be a good start, actually, to allow the debate to filter out of the university and inform public discussions, just so people have a better idea of what the alternatives are. But I agree with you. I would not say that the university has to promote a particular kind of secular morality. And if you notice, a lot of my comments really have to be were really couched in a negative way. We ought to defend the limitedness of secular morality. We ought to take away more parts of it that are currently in the public sphere and return them to where they can be valued in the private sphere without harming the fabric of society in the process. So I agree with you. There is no specific secular morality that the university ought to promote. And this reminds me actually of Marxism in the 1960s and the 70s, which was a secular morality. And in that secular morality, the university was, many faculty in the university were actually deeply involved. The problem, however, is that if you get locked into that particular mode, as and when the circumstances change, you might be left without anything. And I think part of the vacuum we're feeling in the university now is that differentness from the time when there was a single, almost hegemonic way of thinking, which was valuable at the time. It was related to public life. It was secular. It was about the nation. It was about the poor. A lot of common elements that one would want. Some indisputable values that should be included, I suppose. But being locked into a particular version of it, I think disabled the university in the evolutionary way that I described from coming up with an alternative afterwards.
Noel deals with the public sphere. That's accepted. And he believes that secular morality, its proper field, is the public sphere. Yeah. In modern society, the notion of a generalized moral code that is applicable to all of society has become very passé. Where you think of modern society as differentiated into institutional spheres like law, economics, politics, science, and so on and so forth. Each one of these institutional spheres evolves its own quote-unquote moral code. For example, the code for law would be whether it's legal or illegal. The code for the economy would be whether you can buy it or you cannot buy it. The code for politics is whether it is government or opposition. We are not dealing here at all with any notion of any generalized moral code or any generalized morality. So I was wondering whether the language that you are using, the language of secular morality associated with Hume and with Adam Smith, is still applicable to the realities of the modern world. It's my first comment. My second comment has to do with the university with respect to some controversial moral issues like kidney vending, for instance. I just wanted to let you know that a large number of, not a large number, a number of people from the university, College of Law, the Social Sciences, including our own bioethicist, Dr. Leo de Castro, have intervened in this question, just to clarify the issues. Colleagues from the Department of Anthropology, Philosophy, and the College of Medicine have actually undertaken concrete research in order precisely to clarify the sort of issues that you brought up. Yeah. I think the same thing is true on the question of population.
Well, I think the question of Randy is whether the 17th century ideas are still applicable today. Well, in a sense, to the extent that we're a country that's trying to be postmodern without having gone through modernity, there may be something of the 17th century ideas that we still need to internalize. And this is partly seen, I think, in some of those issues that I mentioned. That there still needs to be that clear distinction between spheres that the government ought to get into and where it ought not to be. And the problem, of course, is that our people really need themselves to be informed about where that boundary ought to run. And that's the job of the university.
We have a question from UP Manila. Professor Chester Arcilla is moderating there. Come in, UP Manila.
Good afternoon, Professor Noel. Please comment on the difficulty of aggregating individual passions to social morality in the light of competing and conflicting personal interests, given the role afforded by Adam Smith on government, on the administration of justice, despite his popular assertion of free markets. Is individual behavior not simply a matter of incorporating the risk of non-cooperation, that individuals deviate from playing a dictatorial game?
Okay, let me repeat the question. Please comment on the difficulty of aggregating individual passions to social morality in the light of competing a word is missing there. Competing something afforded by Adam Smith on government, on the administration of justice, despite his assertion of free market. Is it not simply a matter of incorporating the risk of non-cooperation that individuals deviate from playing a dictatorial game?
Actually, I didn't get that last part. But that thing about the dictatorial game, what that had to do with the first part of the question. Your first part was how do you aggregate very individualistic passions in order to come up with a common morality. But I didn't get that part about the dictator game. But let me try to answer that first part in any case. Aggregation is always a problem. That's the classic problem in government. But in terms of morality, our whole discussion today has been about how to reduce the scope for the public sphere in order to afford the greatest freedom to individuals. So in other words, the libertarian philosophy rules here. And in that sense, what you call the very individualistic passions should in principle be given free rein as long as they do not impose an externality or negative effect on others. That is the solution being, that's the vision that's being proposed here. You start having a problem when the strength of the individuals or the authority figures' own passions or sense of morality becomes law for people whether they agree with it or not. That's when you start losing the individuality and you start getting into social conflicts because the government intervenes too heavy-handedly in what is otherwise a private matter.
We have a question from UP Visayas next. Come in, UP Visayas.
Good afternoon from UP Visayas. We have a question from Dr. Joy Lisada of the College of Management.
Good afternoon, sir. Just like to ask the question. In the light of the secular morality, how can you explain the prevalence of corruption in the government?
Well, it's a failure in secular morality. Because even a minimal set of values would say that, well, if you go to those 15 small-scale societies, cheating and lying and stealing are almost universally are universally condemned. So in a sense, you have here a situation where, in the most basic senses, we are failing, namely in the accountability of our public officials, but still we deem it proper to intervene in private decisions of people who, in the sense of, we try to determine what kind of contraception they should have, we try to determine whether they should gamble or not. In other words, the government takes too big a bite, or we as citizens allow the government to take too big a bite in other extraneous spheres, whereas it cannot even discipline its own where it matters.
We have a question from the Open University next. Come in, Open U.
We have a question from Professor Jeg Maranan of the Faculty of Information and Communication Studies.
Good afternoon. First of all, I'm all for secular morality, so yay. My question is, what do you think is the likely future of a secular morality in the Philippines? Not the desired future, but what will likely happen? And what local and global trends do you see affecting it? Thanks.
Prognosis is always hard, especially about the future, right? But this is a tough question because it essentially asks what agents of a receptive audience to secular morality might look like and who the agents of that might be. And at the moment, I think it's still a very inchoate type of constituency who even sees that there is a problem. In our social life, we tend to, it's very comforting to be very homogeneous. We all basically almost have the same, or we think all of us almost have the same religion. And so we take a lot of things for granted. We don't see the need very often of distinguishing between what is in the private sphere and what ought to be in the public sphere, where the government ought to intervene and where it ought not to intervene. And it's that realization, I think, that there is a problem that is the first step in resolving the issue. Because now I don't think people even are conscious that that problem is such an important one. And in the end, it is what? It is education, it is exposure to other trends, but it is also the way we view the national future and what you think are the obstacles to development that will matter. If we don't see it as a problem, we will not solve it.
We have UP Baguio next. Come in, UP Baguio. Professor Mendoza.
Good afternoon. We have a question from UP Baguio. The question is, do you think, Professor De Dios, that the dominance of the ideological left in the University of the Philippines and perhaps even in Philippine public life has contributed to the lack of secular morality today?
Well, I don't know if they're still that dominant at the moment. And as I commented to Randy, I think the advantage of the 60s and the 70s was that a secular institution like the university felt that it had a different message